the storm out, waiting for the thaw out on a full moon night in the Rocky Mountain winter. One bottle slow.
Well, hello, Blue Troopers. I hope you're having a pleasant evening. Well, I've got Viewers Build 36 pretty much done, and I'm going to set it up to release tomorrow because I'll be super busy and probably the only thing I get out. But a lot of great builds in there as usual, and if I receive any more pictures, they'll just go in the bin for Viewers Build 37. You'll probably see a few of these photos again in the United Kingdom build. I sometimes use pictures in more than one of the Viewers Build videos. So I got an email, actually a couple of emails from Paul down in New Zealand, and he's been doing some of these Airfix figures. And that got us wondering, how were the sales of these figure characters? We know the monsters sold very well, but I'm talking about historic figures, other figures like that. Now, I know that Aurora had started making some figures like the Dutch boy and some others, and the Dutch girl, and even as sets, and sort of these international boys and girls and men and women as an attempt to not only make educational models and, of course, sell models and something that people would be interested in buying and building instead of just airplanes and tanks. But they were not the only ones in the game. By the late 50s, Airfix had gotten into the game with 5 figures. Now, it should be noted the figures were very different. The Aurora figures were mostly international figures in the 50s, whereas the Airfix were uniquely British history, except for the Napoleon, who, of course, was still very connected with England, because how many times were the British and the French shooting at each other in those days? So it's one of those things that I guess it's understanding your market. Apparently Airfix was going for something that would resonate in the UK and Europe, whereas the Americans were quite the opposite. They weren't trying to make something that was identified with their culture, but with other cultures. Now, for this to make sense, you have to kind of think of the world in the 50s. Internet, no satellite TV. For an American kid, a place like Holland or Mexico might as well have been on the moon. These weren't just people from other cultures. They were virtually from other planets. And it really would have intrigued the kids. And judging by how long some of these were in production, I'm assuming they were reasonably popular. We were trying to figure out what their sales were. But they must have been doing well, because in the 1960s, Aurora started adding. Now, they weren't just international figures. They also started adding a lot of sports figures. They had already started off with the sports figures in the 50s also, and they started adding more of them in the 60s. Although I found out from some sources that some of the sports figures didn't really do that well. I know they said that the Willie Mays didn't sell very well, and probably a few of the others, because they don't seem to have had real long production runs. Of course, this is also when Aurora started getting into the monster models in the mid-60s, and of course things took off from there. But they even introduced a few new ones in the 70s. By that same token, Aurora was not only going gangbusters on the monster figures and, of course, their regular models and their television tie-ins and everything else, but slot cars, of course, had taken off. So they were really into that. And Aurora had also gotten into making toys. And people tend to forget that. We think of it because we're model builders. We tend to think of Aurora as a kit model company, and it was. But it also made a lot of toys and slot cars and things like that. So they were really going off in different directions. Airfix seems to have been more focused. Airfix never put out as many figures as Aurora did, and the Airfix kit seems to have been in 1/12 scale, whereas most of the Aurora kits seem to have been in 1/8 scale. Although Airfix did release at least 3 more figures in the 70s, Queen Victoria, Queen Elizabeth I, and a Bengal Lancer, but they never were quite, I don't think they were quite as big a thing for Airfix as they were for Aurora, the figure models, that is. But I also got it from a couple of sources that one of the other Aurora figures that didn't sell very well was the John F. Kennedy figure. And I guess, I don't know why, you never know what people will find interesting. But Paul's building a bunch of these figures now, and he's, when he gets done, we'll show them to you in a viewer's build, or maybe do a special presentation just for them. But it got me thinking about it. And of course, these are not the only companies that made figures. Lots of companies did, but Aurora and Airfix are two of the real big ones that we think of. And when it comes to figures, Aurora kind of had a reputation as the figures company. Like in the United States, it was, you wanted cars, it was Monogram or MPC or AMT. You wanted airplanes, it was Revell. And if you wanted figures, it was Aurora. And of course, Airfix did all of everything. Well, anyway, maybe we'll deep dive into this in a little more detail on the live stream or at another time, since we hopefully will have Mr. Separano with us, so we can dig into that a little bit, hopefully. So, guys, take care of yourselves. I hope you're having a wonderful evening. And we're going to hunker down for the weather here, because we have yet another tropical storm coming for Florida, or as we call it, Wednesday. Take care of yourselves, and as always, model on.
And I'm not missing a thing, watching the full moon crossing the rain, right in the storm out, right in the storm out, right in the storm out.